everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Emergency Room podcast. I'm Amie, and I'm joined by Freda, my wonderful co host and fellow Youth Collective member. And tonight we have two really exciting guests joining us. Speaking with us tonight on the theme of archives and artistic practice, we've got Jennifer Reid
Yo.
and Alafuro Sikoki-Coleman.
Hi.
So Jennifer I've got a little spiel for each of you. Jump in if I've got any of this wrong or if you want to describe yourself in better words than I could. But Jennifer is a performer of 19th century Industrial Revolution broadside ballads, specifically from Manchester and Lancashire, which she performs at local events and workshops. Jennifer, I've admired your work for a while, and I got to witness you in action at a workshop in Sheffield, which was very fun. And that was with the Feminist Archive. So that was a really, really nice workshop to think about the changing of the seasons and ballads and folk as culture. So that was really cool. Furo is an industrial designer and artist. She's the founder of Studio Sikoki, a design and art and research facility where she explores the dynamics between the object, user, and environment. Sikoki-Coleman's work analyses the construction of culture, history, and identity of the individual, community, and location. And I know that you've worked on some really interesting projects that I kind of want to get into with like Nigeria 60 and re-entanglements. So it'll be really cool to talk about those in a bit. But just generally to kick us off, how are you both doing today?
Doing well. Having a good day, I think. Yeah, it's been productive.
Yeah, buzzing. Nice to be back in town where it's raining, so I do feel right at home.
Yeah, I feel that. I've had like quite a don't want to say like badly productive, but I've had a lot in my day. So I feel like today is going to be like, this evening is going to be such a nice sort of chilling discussion. So I'm excited for it.
Take your boots off, Amie. Take them off. Leave them.
I know, I'm trying. I literally like ran here from a dentist appointment, which was horrid. So I'm like trying to like zone into the happy vibes. So yeah. Freda, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good as well. I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you two and also with Amie as well. And yeah.
So without further ado, Freda, do you want to kick us off with the first question?
Yeah. So I wanted to introduce myself actually.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I
I
realized I didn't introduce myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Really bad. Okay, let's introduce ourselves. Okay, Freda, you go first.
Well, hi, I'm Freda. I'm a multidisciplinary artist whose work is rooted in storytelling, and I'm part of the Youth Collective member. And Amie.
Hi, I'm Amie. My pronouns are she, her. I have just finished a project with the Working Class Movement Library in Salford, which used archives on a political group called Big Flame, who were active in the 70s and 80s, to run a youth engagement programme with working class young people, to use archives as a tool for community building and political education. And ultimately that resulted in a co-curated exhibition, which was really, really fun to make. And now I just want to work with archives as much as possible, mainly in like a community engagement setting, but just generally as much as I can. And yeah, also part of the Youth Collective, which is a very fun time, although we have to leave soon, which is not very fun.
So we actually were very curious about your first ever job, and was it ever related to your practice now?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
My first ever job was actually data entry.
Oh.
I worked for a charity that collected, well, they did fundraising. And part of my job was to digitize names and addresses from like signatures and people who donated to the charity. So searching through the electoral register and pulling names and addresses and getting everything in so we could send thank you letters and etc. out to them. So that was I enjoyed it because I don't know, it was repetitive. So there's something quite soothing for me when I know that I have to keep doing the same thing over and over, but there was an investigative element to it as well. And I think it also appealed to the completionist in me, just knowing that if I had like a massive stack of just documents to complete, I mean, we weren't even, pressured to finish anything within a certain time period, but I just enjoyed that, like knowing that I was working through and I could see my progress. So as I kept going and my sheet, so I liked that. I think I felt efficient. So I really, really enjoyed it. And a lot of people do not like work like that, but it was perfect. And I think how it leads to links to my day-to-day practice. It's oddly similar, like you have to go through archives looking for information and finding sometimes the same thing, but in different guises. The same way, you could be looking for a John Smith who signed a donation, but making sure it's the right one. And there might be 20 in the same, area, but just making sure you're doing justice to the work and not spamming other people with information that they didn't request. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
And how about you, Jennifer?
My first job were at Sainsbury's in Eaton Park, and I got sacked for would smuggle stuff out in my skirt waistband, so I could fit like 5 gingerbread men. And then it got to the point where I got put on making strawberry tarts, which was pretty chilling because she did it in this little corner. And then I'd like make one, eat one, and then I got this like tap on my shoulder, which is a bit annoying. But then, yeah, I've worked after that in like call centres, like the car auction at Bellevue, home bargains in Bury. Like, to be honest, the mill seems like the one for me. That's probably why I sing about it.
I'm just picturing you with like a little gingerbread man belt situation going on. Yeah, I'm a fan.
Watch for that in Vogue. Watch for that in Brazilian Vogue next year.
Everyone's going to be on it next.
And how about you, Amie? What was your first job? I'm really curious.
My first job was a temporary sales assistant at Next.
Ooh.
Before like one of their Christmas sales. So I wasn't actually doing lots of stuff on the shop floor. I was like behind the scenes, like putting really inane little stickers onto like clothing tags and stuff over and over again. Which was also quite repetitive and methodical and like quite therapeutic in that way. I do like a sort of repetitive action. But yeah, it wasn't anything particularly linked to what I do now, except for both of them are quite underpaid, I guess.
Yeah, the arts.
The arts.
The arts.
What about you, Freda?
Funny enough, Youth Collective is my first job ever.
Oh, I love that.
I know, it's kind of insane. When I got the job, I was like, what? I'm so excited. But I've done a bit of freelancing in art assistant. So I did a workshop, work experience with the through the Young Community newsletter. And I got to work with this lady called Patience Ardy. She does really cool stuff now, but she put me until doing like set design and art department stuff, which was really, really fun. It wasn't as repetitive. I really do love repetitive jobs. I like the idea of being able to do the same thing over and over again, but set design is a whole different, very chaotic lifestyle. You always kind of have to be on the go. You have to know people, you have to learn how to drive, so much. But yeah, Youth Collective, I would
What
suggest.
would a typical day like on set look like?
So before even on set, you have to source materials. So obviously creating a mood board for the brief, and then going out to prop houses and sourcing materials that the directors would possibly want to be on set. And then set day comes, which is usually the most chill part of the entire process. You set out the place and you see how it looks on camera, see how things needs to be removed or added on. And yeah. Before the shoot day is usually the most chaotic.
Yeah.
Never fun. But it's fun, like sourcing props and stuff. It's really like, oh, I get to decorate this place for a little bit.
What is the most random thing? This is to all of us. What's like the most random thing that you have seen or done in like any of your jobs? It can be like your first job or like a job you've done recently. Like for you, Freda, like what's the most like random prop that you've ever come across?
This is so funny. We had this was during my first year. I was assisting this artist, Jade Adeyemi, and she basically hired horses on set. It was in Brixton. We were shooting. This never actually came out, so I don't know what happened with post production. It was with Idris Alba, and I don't remember the other artist's name, but they were basically shooting a music video for a music video, basically, and they had horses with bantu nuts. Yeah. I thought that was so cute. I will send you a picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
And that was the most random. I've never seen horses with bantu nuts before. They like flattered their hair and like tied it into knots. So cute, so precious. How about you, Lauren?
I don't think I've had anything really odd happen. Well, yeah, I got a sort of like a commendation. The directors and people who ran the charity showed up one day out of the blues. I was probably like scoffing biscuit in my mouth and like, oh yeah, this is Furo. And I was like, well, okay, hi. And they were like, oh, well done. Your files always are in tip-top shape, and we always get like our biggest donors, because of you. So that was totally like unexpected and mind-blowing. And it made me realize how important, my little job or endeavor was in the grander scheme of things, because they were raising money for charity. So just being diligent, I think, was helping, so I could see the big picture as a result of that. But yeah, that was strange. And they didn't have to, show up and do that. And yeah, I was grateful they did. I think it gave me a renewed sense of, like the idea of being proud of what you do and doing it right. So yeah, that was interesting. But I haven't seen any weird things on set and well, not on set, on site, working with museums. I think when you're in the archives and just museum collections, there are strange things. Well, you see, there have been like carriages, related to horses. Like you go into museum archives and you see like, bits that you just like, 4-foot long spears collected from the Pacific, and, thousands and thousands of butterflies. And you're like, what is this doing here? Like why? So those questions arise, but somehow maybe I'm a bit desensitized to them. You get used to seeing so much out of context that you realize, okay, it's part of the system. But yeah, I think it is strange, when you zoom back out, like it's strange to see, a canoe in some storeroom from 1750. Why is it here? But yeah, I think somehow if you spend enough time within the collections, these things become normal. But yeah, so yeah, they are odd in themselves, but yes, food for thought.
Yeah. I feel like I want to come back to that later, actually.
Me too.
That like sensitizing element, because I've definitely felt it. I think for me, it's been really fun recently to work somewhere like the Working Class Movement Library, because there's so much random bits of Labour history over like the past couple hundred years. One of my friends is volunteering at the library, and they were like helping to catalogue one of the collections that we have. Can't remember the name of the person whose collection, like who donated it. But one of the objects is a brick, like an inscribed brick from a union that's like, this is the one that wasn't dropped. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what kind of inside joke is that? But I just love sometimes coming across things like that, that are almost like little jokes or something that you don't feel privy to. And you're like, you know what? That's actually kind of nice. I like not knowing what they meant by that, because it's for them. Like it meant something to them. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Jennifer, have you
Oh.
had something weird happen?
Yeah, every day. So, I mean, the one when I worked at a car auction, it was just in Bellevue, so it's like near Gorton. But it was the only job I had where I could hit the customers because they're all like car dealers. And I'd have a massive stack of V5s where I'd be like walking to and from because they didn't even have female toilets built on site, so you'd have to spend your break going to Portaloo. And then I'd walk past dealers and they'd be like, "Oh, have you got a phone in that back pocket? Because that ass is calling me." And I'd have a massive stack of V5s and I'd be like, "Yup." Like get them across the back and that, and they'd be like, "Whoa," like cheeky. And then I'd just be like hounding them on the phone, like, "You need to pay. You're not coming to a Wednesday night sale. You've got 5 hours, pay up." But it was nice because in the canteen at morning, I could get 2 slices of fried bread and beans for 40p. That was great.
Wow.
Yeah, boy.
Deal and a half, that.
I
Yeah.
cycled there, so you know I would keep in trim light, but my diet wasn't very good.
I guess going from that, what are you both doing now in terms of your like creative practice and the projects that you're taking on? And more broadly, how do you use archives in your work? And I guess what sort of made you start with archives? Like what drew you to archives? Should we go for first and then Jen?
Okay. So I began working with archives in, let's say, 2016 or so. And I think I fell into it by happenstance. It wasn't something I was seeking to actively pursue. It's very random. So I took a photo of all the green things I owned, and that was in 2014. And so I was, in my own way, I was trying to commemorate Nigeria's independence. And I had this brainwave. I was like, oh, I should just gather every green object I own and place it like outside on the decking and try and get a photo of it. And I took a photo of it and I posted that on my Instagram. And later on, I was talking with some curators and we're discussing the idea of nation building. So I was showing as an artist in the exhibition Forms of Flow, Flow of Forms. So that was curated by Kirsten Pinta and a host of other amazing curators, too numerous to mention, but they're just lovely. I really enjoyed working with them. And so we began to look at the idea of archiving, your history. And I created this work called Private Atlas, Nigeria 1960. And I ended up going around to like auction houses and antique shops. But I started, building a collection of pre-independence and independence era objects from Nigeria. So I ended up collecting and creating my own archive linked to my understanding of that slice of time within Nigeria's history. And that was how the journey began. So that project morphed into Nigeria 60, where I ended up working with the Horniman Museum's archives and also the collection from a family that bequeathed their collection to the Horniman. So it was 3 archives coming together. And yeah, it's continued ever since. So right now I'm working on a personal project where I'm really digging deep to expand on Woyingi, which I worked on. It's on show at the Horniman. So that went on exhibition in 2018, but it looks at a forgotten deity from the Ijaw culture, where my family comes from in Nigeria, where God was a woman. And she created the earth and she made all the people within it up until, the British colonial government came in place and kind of moved her aside and Christianity took over. However, her name was kept and embedded within Christian doctrine. So within Christianity, in my culture, God is Woingi, but then if you translate the meaning of Woingi, it means our mother or she who made us. So there's this interesting play where, first time I heard it, people were saying the Lord's Prayer, and it was like Woingi, our Father, who art in heaven. I was like, our mother, our father. So I try to understand, the origin of it. And so right now I am embedded in archives, but just looking for information collected by anthropologists and also objects, so looking for texts and objects that surround this myth or this figure. And it's not easy to find things, but yeah, it's an ongoing journey, I think.
That sounds really, really cool. When did you start sort of looking into that project?
So it's been with me since I would say 2007. That was when I first discovered her. And yeah, I was restless about it. Just kept asking questions, and it's strange when you know that there's something there and the seeds planted, but life happens. You're working, busy, but it just stays and nags at you till it comes into fruition. So I was commissioned by the Horniman to kind of flesh her out, and she's in the World Gallery now, and that was incredible to work on. So just physically making and photographing, just to make sure that there was an image representative of the idea. And so I'm working in ceramics now and making the eggs, just exploring that aspect because it's really world building. We're trying to recreate a world that existed at one point, or it's a whole way of thinking, that just got wiped out, and it's painful. So I see this as a form of conservation and trying to, repiece history and understand, the timeline of how this concept existed for centuries, and all of a sudden, well, it took time. It wasn't too sudden, but in the broad spectrum of time, it's such a small window, and just decimated, and the idea suppressed, and the replacement disseminated, and no one knows, really like who she was, or what she was about. And it's frightening to think about how history can be navigated and just reshaped in certain ways, especially, cultural history, which is part of our heritage, right? So it's something I'm very curious about, how memory exists, but also how cultures change, and understanding that an archive, I think it's something I came to the resolution that archives aren't past, we are part of the archives, it's a living thing, and we are continuously adding to the archive. So you almost look at yourself and what you create as part of a future archive. So it's a continuation for me. And I think it's something I hold dear, because it makes me understand that whatever I create is important, and I'm adding to the story to continue it, rather than try to create something new or what's desirable. It's like, no, hold on to your thoughts and your ideas, like be steadfast with that, and just, stick to the path. So yeah, it all makes sense in the long run because it's part of a story.
That was beautiful. That was very well. Like, you've basically explained my own practice as well, which is so beautiful to listen to. I think it's very important what you mentioned about forgotten histories, and how it's very important for us to make stuff to almost regenerate that history. And I think that's something that was very important with my own practice, my final year project from my university. I was also looking at how colonialism has sort of destroyed our indigenous practice in terms of rituals, religion, spirituality as well, and how Christianity is sort of almost reduced our, well, not almost actually, it has reduced our practice to something that's deemed as demonic and like wrong. So my project, I sort of created like a series of sculptures to commemorate my traditional practice from my paternal grandmother's family, and how they would, have a ritual in their home and they'll pray to the shrine. And obviously, growing up in Nigeria, that was something that I was always so scared of, because it was something that I wasn't particularly as involved with, especially because I was also raised in a strong Christian household. So the parallel between those two sort of like almost shifted my brain, because I'm like, why is one side worshiping one God and the other side is actively worshiping 45 gods? And obviously that is in a Christian mindset and in a church that is deemed as something that's demonic and is basically not right. And obviously now as an adult and going back home to Nigeria and actually properly understanding and learning the rituals behind the spiritual practice, and also just trying to release myself from the fear that I had, it sort of allowed me to create my own, not necessarily my own gods, but gods inspired by what my grandmother was praying to and worshiping, and showing them in a different light. And it's not something that's like demonic and scary and this thing that I need to be afraid of or that people need to speak ill towards. And so I think it's really important that in terms of archives and conversations, my form of archive is conversations. I tend to have a lot of like talk with my dad, my grandma from my mother's side, my mom as well, and my aunt from my paternal side of the family. I think it's very important to just talk to people, especially the older generation, because obviously now young people are not necessarily like wanting to know much about their cultural heritage and the like spiritual beliefs behind these things, because there's already been like a conditioning happening that this is something that you should be afraid of and you shouldn't talk about it. And so I think it was really important for me to just talk to people. Yeah.
I really, really, really resonate with that. I feel like coming at it from a slightly different perspective, but still really similar to what you were saying. I'm reaching the point with my family where my parents are obviously around, but my grandparents aren't really around anymore. And there's so much of my family history that I wish I'd had like the foresight to ask them loads of questions and be like, oh my gosh, what was this like? What was it like growing up in Bagley or like whatever? And my dad's side of the family are from Ireland, and he never talks about it because he has like a really complicated relationship with his side of his family. But there's so much there that I want to like learn and unpack that I can't really get from my dad alone, because he doesn't really like to talk about it, but then there's no one else really around to talk about it with, so it just feels like it's a part of my lineage that I don't really have access to, which is quite sad.
It is quite tricky talking to people that it's not necessarily a trauma, but it's like it's a conversation they don't want to have, especially with my maternal grandmother. She's like, nope, don't talk to me about the African traditional spirituality. Like, I don't want to hear about it. It's called Ogun. And she's like, don't talk to me about it. Like, I believe in God and this is how I got into Christ, but I don't want to talk about the past. And I kind of like, I can't do much about it. But my dad is very willing, and my aunt is also very willing to share from what they know about their mother, sorry. So it's nice to still have that access, but I know it is quite tricky. And how about you, Jennifer?
So I use archives with everything. Archives is it. I have to use it. It's where everything comes from. I'm literally sat here with it all out. I have to be surrounded by it. Otherwise, what am I doing? So I use like old books, like garlands, like collections of Lancashire dialect poetry. I've got this guy came into the cafe in Nelson and he wrote down all these different phrases and sayings. Be wary, be chary, take heed who thou courts. There's lasses in plenty of sizes and sorts. But if thou'd be happy, take on with a lass that's nimble with thimble and careful with brass. What is it? When thou starts courting, remember a tuppenny pie costs 4 pence because you got to buy two. So that's cool. My mate yesterday gave me this Cotton Town Chronicle by John T. Burren, also known as Jackarans. So these are all the different dialect poetry, Blackburn accent, so it's a bit thick. All the different poems he published in the newspaper. So I'm going to crack on with that. I've got a few of his, but I do find the Blackburn stuff really nice. East Lancs, Blackburn, Burnley, that type do really nice. Then you've got like the ballads. So I started looking at the ballads from early. This is what ballad looked like. Me and ballad. Where is it? Do like that. Yay. So what have I done here? So yeah, ballad sheets. This is a flip song, but there's also they come on bigger sheets of paper and they run from like 1600s to like 1890s, 1900. This one was very popular in around about 1850, 1860 in town. Pomona, you might know it as the tram stop.
Yeah.
But it was actually, it was a bit of a nightclub as well. But before then, it was the rival Pleasure Gardens to Bellevue, more towards like White City Retail Park area. Thank you, Peel Holdings, for preserving that. And then you've got published bits of poetry. So this is 1866. This is Edwin Waff's Lancashire Poems. This is printed up. I mean, Abel Hayward also printed some stuff up in Northern Quarter. It's a gastro pub now. But he was printing a lot of stuff. Simpkin and Marshall as well in London. Like there's a lot of, anyway, getting very, very specific. And then also things that people write down. So if I sing a song and someone says, oh, I knew a different verse to that, I'll get them to write it down. And I carry everything with me at all times. So I had to condense it somewhat. But this is all just bits of paper and that I've just constantly got with me. Archives in my practice. Archives is my practice. When I did that ballad workshop with yous, then I did one at Senate House and we had all the ballads out and I got seriously nerdy, like down to the font, down to, oh my God, this is the standard English version of this Lancashire dialect song that was written by William Billington. Oh, he would have written this about 1880. So this would have been what exciting.
Yeah.
And then what was the first question that you asked? What am I doing currently?
Yeah.
Nah, scared of diary currently. So I've got loads of gigs and stuff on. Me and my mate Tom have written this show called Bitter and Mild. I'll let you guess who's who. And it's got loads of different folk bits in it. It's got a big horse's skull that's lacquered, from the Cheshire Mumming play. I'm going to now say a lot of folk terms that might go right over the top of your head, but feel free to Google at any stage. So mumming plays, they're good. Usually do them on farms in Cheshire. You go in and out everyone's houses. A lot of people can't be asked with it, so they want it to end quickly, which is great because you've got a captive audience. Then they shoo you out. Sometimes you get some money for beer. Very nice. I don't drink, but God bless you. Then we've got a jig doll, which is an articulated wooden doll on a piece of doweling. You tap a board and he dances on the stage. It's great because sometimes his arm goes round proper, like, whoa, what's going on? Usually have a fiddle to accompany that. Clog dancing as well, like that's all part of that show. And it's just to kind of show people saw this stuff in the revival in the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s, but kids now don't really know the half of it. So it's nice to kind of sing older songs to them that were slightly revived in the folk revival, but the folk revival only went so far. I've got Destroy Folk Scene literally tattooed on my hand because I'm just not very impressed. Not very impressed, actually. Not very impressed. There could be a lot more to be done with people knowing where the songs come from, who wrote them, where they're stored, supporting. Like my new album literally is called The Ballad of the Gatekeeper because people are accidentally gatekeeping things that they should be flinging wide open. I don't know why you need to sit on it. Maybe it's comfy. I do not know. Get it out there. Get it shared. Like let me talk about Bagley. loads of like soul caking traditions from near you. So again, just one thing to look at. And then of course, like the whole decolonization thing, which I find very important. Going to New Zealand on tour for 4 months in December, which is very close. And I go there until April, and I've got loads of gigs up and down. But I'm going to adapt some ballads that I've got written by a guy in 1870 in London, and he came over to New Zealand and wrote about the miners there. So again, that's a useful perspective that I can then bring in Maori culture, as opposed to like being white all over it, because I'm not very interested in that. I think that's just a terrible perspective. What else? Also bringing in like young working class people into folklore, so they understand that folklore isn't of the old people, it's of the people. It's really handy that word law has come back into fashion, because now teenagers kind of are halfway there with it, which is bad. And yeah, just telling them that, like, you know, folklore is a JD bag, all these things that you don't quite realize are cultural markers now in the now. They are actually folklore. It doesn't have to be old, it's just what you identify with. So again, like, swap out Stonehenge for a retail park all day long. Like, that's my whole take on it.
Love that so much.
Amazing.
What was like your first encounter with archives and like balladry? Like, what led you to it?
Right, well, I come back from Barcelona where I was squatting, and I moseyed on down to Chetham's library because it looked like freaking Harry Potter, and they let me have a brew in there. So I would sit in there and have a brew. It was really nice. People were pretty sound. Michael, the librarian at the time, he was from Farnworth in Bolton, just legend. And then he put me in front of the ballads and was like, digitize these. So that's why I like ballads so much, because I was welcomed into a warm environment where I didn't really felt like I belonged anywhere, and I started digitizing these songs. Jeremy Deller won the Turner Prize. He said he wanted some of the ballads in his exhibition. I chose some. He chose them. I put some nursery rhymes to them, and then my first gig was the freaking Venice Biennale. And then after that, yeah, what the hell? And then after that, I kind of thought, okay, this is something I'm interested in. I had to quit Home Bargains because he won't give me 2 weeks off to go and do the Biennale. Then I come back and I'm thinking I could really catalyse this. And it's cool because when I go back to Chetham's now, a lot of my mentors have died. A lot of the like maybe even Royston, like Working Class Movement Library, like a lot of legends have since left us, and now I really feel the weight of the tradition, and I do it in my own way, because people always assume, like, you know, pat on the head, like, oh, do you dress up? Like, no, girl, I do not do no dressing up. I just look like this. This is what the tradition looks like currently, I'm afraid. This is it. So it's helping people to understand as well. It's not historical reenactment. It's happening right now. If the tradition didn't evolve, we'd be prancing about to harpsichords. Like, it's just not. Just people's minds just need a bit of a rejig. So yeah, then after that, I was just kind of trying to get. There's a phrase in Blackburn which my mate Jackie said to me the other day, and she just said, "You get where water can," and that's the point. Like, I put this stuff in front of everyone, from like people at the St George's Day Centre in Bolton, and we're doing workshops messing about with clay, all the way to like singing for Chanel and doing crazy stuff like that. You know, like, I've got a real varied range. This material is important, and I realised when I went to New Zealand in April that I would actually die for it. And that's when it gets funky, because once you don't want to die for the material, what the hell? What the hell? Okay, I'm just going to live like this then. I'm just going to do this forever. So I've gone real, like, hard on it. The Ballad of the Gatekeeper, I wrote some new songs that addresses just some bigoted views in the folk scene that I don't quite agree with, like anti-trans stuff, people denying climate change. Okay, bro. Okay. And just trying to bring people into the tradition in a way that isn't scary or old or weird. It's like, you can just hang with me and it'll be fine.
As if there were like climate change deniers in the folk scene.
They're everywhere. I mean, it's a thing, but it's funny, isn't it? When people come to the end of their natural working life and they retire, they sometimes just give up on a lot of things, and yeah, that, like, there's, you know, there's just a responsibility pass. I mean, it's the individualism of the Thatcher era, in my humble opinion, that's
Yeah.
ruined the concept of community, and now it's being put back to us at the price of £7.20 for a coffee. You can sit in a co-working space and cosplay community when community is built on mutual aid and belief. But hey, what do I know? What do I know?
Both of you, Jen and Furrow, do either of you feel, and I feel like you've both picked up on it a little bit in different ways, and Freda, even when you were talking about your research, do you feel not burdened, but do you feel like a strong personal responsibility in what you do with archives, whether it's collecting with your community or using archives to try and build community and get, for example, sort of working class history out there? Do you feel like, how do you reconcile that?
I think it's tough. It's lonely and it's tough. I don't know anyone. I'm looking for people like me within my community. I found one. I know there are probably more, but we're trying to create a little unit where we can share what we know, we can support each other, even though our streams are different. So I recently met someone on Instagram. She reached out to me just saying like, oh, thank you for what you're doing. It's really important. And, you know, like that was very moving. So I wrote back and we ended up having like very, very long conversations. Like, you know, we spoke. And even though she's in fashion and I'm industrial design and art, but there's so many overlapping streams. So we just try and touch base regularly and catch up. But she's out in Nigeria, I'm in the UK, but, you know, just talking and finding ways in which we can enrich each other's professions, but also help each other along the way to discover more. And I think it's a never-ending conversation. You know, there's so much to learn, and it's important that the curiosity, that spark, the fire never dies. You can't ever stop or think you're done. You know, I don't think it ever ends. And like my father always says, you know, the moment you stop learning or being curious, you're pretty much as good as dead. You need to always, always keep your eyes open, your ears open, keep your mind open. You know, you can never stop learning. And there's just so much to learn and know. But every time you learn something new, you realize, you know, you actually don't really know much. So you have to continue. And it is a big task, I think. There's a lot unwritten work, undocumented work, but also work that's been destroyed. So much, you know, of our culture and history was just burned, destroyed, and also miswritten. And a lot of our history too was oral, but I found out from my dad there was a form of written language in my culture. So when he was little, the elders, you know, his elders wrote with that, but it doesn't, no one knows anything about it. So I'm searching within institutional archives, hoping that I can find, you know, maybe a photograph taken by a missionary or someone, you know, who was out there, government anthropologist who documented it. So looking through these archives, I'm trying to rebuild a picture of what was. And I think in a way it's important for cultures, marginalized cultures, especially like I'm Ijaw, and we are the fourth largest nation, like ethnic nation within Nigeria, but we're coastal and not in a condensed space as such. So we run down the coast and also outside Nigeria as well. But representation isn't high or huge. And I think it's important to help inform, you know, like who we were, who we are. And also it just helps to where you're going. And conservation is important because you're collecting almost like pieces of self-esteem from the past. and putting them together to create a mirror that you can look at. And it's important, you look at yourself in the present, you understand the past, but it guides you for the future. Knowing your history is important. And that involves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So when you work within archives, it can be challenging because you discover things maybe about your community or even the person who documented their views or, the views of your community. I would say might belong to a particular time and a way of thinking, but you learn to distance yourself from who wrote it and how they wrote it or what happened, and to try and look at the information. But then there's also a time to really connect with, and you feel it. You can be in the archives and come out drained and depressed and crying or just overwhelmed with awe, like, wow, look at what we made, and look at all this greatness that nobody knows about, or this has been in a box for 200 years and I'm the first person to open this and engage with it. Like, all this time it's been asleep, in the storeroom. So yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing journey. It just doesn't end. But yeah, it can feel lonely at times, and you get used to investigating, and you learn to be patient and to be consistent and never taking no for an answer, and always going back and finding ways to work with the archives.
When you have those moments where you find those encounters maybe quite draining or harrowing, or like you come across something that sort of stops you in your tracks a little bit, how do you deal with that?
I think I've learned from a quite a young age to trust myself. I think my parents ensured when we were little, you create a strong sense of self, and to always define yourself for you. So I think knowing yourself, like your core, what makes you you, is really important. And you sculpt it and it's strong. So no matter what, your center is secure. So you can get dents and knocked down, etc. But it's really important to always return to center, to remember who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. Also to see that it's so much bigger than you. And I think that drives me. I think but also understanding, like I will have bad days and I need to just recover, understand, feel everything I'm feeling, analyze it too. I think that's something I've been doing recently. Whenever something's off or I feel funny, I just define it. I write it down. Like, this happened. Why did it happen? What am I thinking? And I really list everything down so that I'm not carrying around swirling thoughts or, maybe not, but break it down, and really be forensic about it. And that way I understand the scenario and I know how to address it. So, but I do that, within my work, but also conversations or dealings with people too. You can have something funny happen and you go, why did that happen? What happened? But it's just something I learned to do, and it helps save a lot of brain space. You don't ruminate on things that could be like non-events, and you just think, okay, got it, that worked, this didn't, try another route. So but yeah, I think just returning to self, I think, really helps, and remembering why you're doing what you're doing, almost like your mission or your charter. Like, I'm here for this, and this is what matters, so I'm gonna keep going. And yeah, I think sometimes you need a break as well. You might just say, I'm done with this. I hate this project right now. I can't do this, and concentrate on something else. And then when you move back to it, you're coming to it with like a fresh perspective. And I always find that you can never feel the same way after encountering an object or problem or document twice. The first time you read it or encounter it, it's different. The next time, it's completely different, or you pick up on nuances, and so it's ever changing because you're changing as well. So there's something beautiful about it, or because you've learned something new, or you've spoken to an elder, or you've seen something that is connected to it. And so I think archives are living, and sometimes they just need us to view them in the right conditions, and then they speak to you.
I wanted to ask, actually, based on that, Jennifer, like when you perform different songs, or like when you have conversations about different like you were saying before, like sometimes phrases can get interpreted differently, or like different places will have different versions of like certain lines and stuff. Do you find that your understanding of these songs and like their history like changes from performance to performance?
Oh my God, yeah. I've been singing some songs for like 16 years, and like they're totally different, and the way they fit in your mouth is different, and you get like that tiny little joke that they're making because when you visited that mill 10 years ago you didn't realize what a tappet was, and now you saw the tappet on the weekend and you're like, oh my God, yeah, in it, that is funny, that would make that noise, and then that noise in that cadence lends itself to that shape of that word, and then when I'm doing that phrase, that is why now I can include the tappet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like it's all part of it. It's one of them where you can't practice what you preach if you don't, like, you can't sing about weaving if you haven't woven. And then if I haven't woven on a hand loom to a song about a hand loom, what are you doing, girl? What are you doing, Miss Girl? You need to be
It's
weaving at the
embodied
same
rap.
time. Yeah, what the
Yeah.
hell? And again, for archives, it's like, to quote William Billington from like 1880s, he wrote this, but look under leaves if you want to find any nuts. Do you know what I mean? You've got to go doing the digging.
Yeah.
And I'm one of them where I know where the song was from, who wrote it. Like, if I can, when it comes to dialect, that's easier, but ballads, not so much. But I'll take you to where it's stored. I'll take you to the archivist who's in charge of it, and then they can help you. I'll give it, like, the people that sang it before me. It like, I place myself in the tradition physically. So I only try and sing the songs that maybe Harry Boardman did. I won't really do Ewan McCall because he's a bit like, bit of a sketchy dude. So then I'm kind of focusing on the other people that are a bit more legendary, and then I become more legendary as a result. And then the people that go on in that spirit will know then that there's like a golden thread. It's that poem that that guy wrote, and it's like there is a gold, there's a thread, and no one else can really see it, and you explain it, and people die and things change, but you never ever ever let go of the thread. And that's the point of it. Like, it's, for me, it's like sand, a rope under some sand on the beach, and you just got to keep yanking, like, go, go, go for it. You're addicted to it. You're part of it. You can't let it go because you're in too deep now. Like with the Chetham's ballad collections, someone said something the other day, and I was just like, yeah, that's in Gin Crack and Aria by Jeffrey Jimcrack. And they're like, we've been trying to find that reference for ages. And I'm like, what the hell? Employ me now. So yeah, absolutely, you've got a responsibility to the archive as well. And then my friend Graham from Incline Press, he would print up the ballads all the way down to the font he would be a pedant about. So then we've got all these different moving working parts, and of course stuff changes over time when you're reading it, and the more knowledge you have and the more historically relevant stuff that you come across, you realize that, oh my God, that's a joke on that, or like that's a takeoff on that, or this pamphlet was made as a direct kind of jibe to that thing that was published, and because it was printed on that street, that would have been well funny. So it's just understanding the environment. So like for me as well, if you want to look at ballads, and if you want to know about ballad singers, you don't go to the ballads straight away. Go to the noise complaints that the council had to deal with in that time, and see who was singing where and who was complaining. Right, so if they're complaining, they've got about 4 ballad singers. Right, what would they have been singing? Right, if it's round about this time, this was going on. So the Blanketeer March had just happened, and Peterloo was about to kick off. Interesting, bit of political fervency. So this would have, like, you know, it's understanding the world that you're trying to communicate, and then from once you've got that nailed, which takes time, people, like that takes years. Once you've got that under your belt, then you can start making references to the modern day, because then you've got this mad brain that everything you see then becomes accessible through your historical lens, and then that's why these songs are able to live on, because the tradition continues.
Wow. Do you find that you are part of the archives now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'd sang at Central. Oh my God, sorry to point. I'm pointing on Zoom. What the hell? I sang at Central Library with an Irish singer, McDara Yates, who's fucking sick, mate. And he does what I do, but from Dublin. So like we were proper, just like factory voice going off, like big gobber clock. Love McDara. And we had the ballads out, and some of my notes were in there from like 15 years previous. And like my mate Bruce like picked up this little bit. My writing was so nice. I can't believe what happened to my writing. But Bruce passed me this like little piece of paper, and he was like, "Is this yours?" And I was like, "You're kidding me!" But also, what a crime! What a crime that no one's opened that page apart from me 15 years ago, or someone's been very neat and lovely with it. But it stresses me out that people aren't fingering these things. People aren't picking them up and actually using them. Like, this page is falling out of this because I use it as a book. You know what I mean? As what it's for. I get that it's a piece to be respected, but there's ballads in Chetham's library with like the corner like burnt away because someone's been singing it by candlelight and burnt it. There's a loom at Quarrybank Mill, a hand loom, that on the beam that you pull, there's the indent on the thumb is so like indented from all the weavers touching it. Are you kidding me? I would just sit there like charging up on that beam, like, oh my God, amazing. Like, speak to me. When I used to do I used to train the staff at Wivenshaw Hall just for a very brief period. And I'd go into the side rooms, the ante rooms of the hall, and I'd just say to the ghosts, right, just give me one thing that no one else knows in this lifetime that I can just use and teach people with. Just give me one fact, one mad thing that's definitely true that happened to you that I can then like make a song about and just, you know, share with everyone. But they never shared anything, but never mind. You literally can't ask. You can't ask.
I think it's really important that you almost a bridge to everyone. I think that is so interesting and also very important in this day and age, and how people don't Google stuff anymore. And sometimes, I mean, a conversation is always nice to sort of really learn more. I wanted to ask, do you ever have to like decolonize your own way of thinking about archives?
Holy moly, yeah, of course. The things that you grow up thinking, especially like being from Middleton, there's like some real funky views going on. And then you realise after a while that you need to reteach yourself how to view the world. Like the Industrial Revolution, you know, that is clearly, so many people are excited about that, but that is built on the pain and suffering of like literally most of the world. And then where England has been, she obviously leaves residues of culture. So when I go over to Bangladesh, I wrote a book about how you can use Lancashire weaving songs from the working class perspective to discuss what's going on in fast fashion and the factories now, because it's literally exactly the same thing happening. It's a colonial Victorian thing going on. Like, there's a reason I'm banned from the High Commission in Bangladesh within like a week. It's like don't want to hear it. They're not ready to hear it. Like, I was walking around the factory with my dictaphone in my bra and then getting it translated, and then literally the things they were saying were exactly what was going on in the Victorian times, because we were selling blueprints and machinery to like South Asia, for example. And then like the whole setup of even where the staff were is exactly the same as what it was to improve productivity. And if that is then the bar that's been set, why would not the industry grow, but then with like technology in mind? So it has been a real, I mean, I'm obviously just very much starting on this journey. I'm only 34, like I'll hopefully live a bit longer than this, but it is very much, you've got to view the material, and then you've got to understand how you're viewing it, and then you've got to kind of see it for what it actually is, remove the little I want to say vignette, but that's not a thing. Remove the view that I've got on it culturally, see it for what it is, and then put it into perspective of other stuff. So what a really good way that helped me was in 1861 to 1865, we experienced the Lancashire cotton famine, and it was a lot to do with operatives refusing to use slave picked cotton, and then we had to use shirat from India, which was a shorter fibre, which meant just a brief history. So slave pick cotton at that time, it was really, really long fibres, so that when you were piecing it back up, it was quite easy because you had a bit of purchase on it. Couldn't do it with the snails, but different story. And then shirat, very, very short fibre. So if you try to piece that up, you've got holes. And that's where the word shoddy came from, because we were trying to, in West Yorkshire, it's got a kind of a different variant of the word shoddy, but it's pretty much meaning like poorer quality fibres to make poorer quality goods. But people accepted that in order to support the there's Confederates and there's Union, in order to support the Union, in order to, is that right? Is that, I just think of them as the Blue Legends, but you can't say Blue Legends when you're trying to be an academic. The anti-slavery people that wanted to abolish slavery. So that is why there's a statue of Abraham Lincoln on Brazen-Nose Street, just down from the town hall, because he was like, thank you. Well, he says thank you to the working men of Manchester, even though women made up a large part of the population, but it's okay, we'll take it. So when I'm reading the poetry, some of the poetry is talking about the white slaves of England, and I'm just like, ooh, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Because it's necessary for some people who are singing these songs, and especially in colonial outposts such as like New Zealand and Australia, when they really want to buzz off England, and I have to kind of shout at them quite a bit to say what you think England is representing in your mind is a very like propagandist view, and truly the reason England is well known in these places is for the destruction and pain that has been caused, and it's not something to be excited about or proud of. And using the poetry is helpful, because a lot of the Lancashire dialect poets are very much abolitionist in their perspective. They totally understand why people are suffering, but also that the suffering of people in England is in no way the suffering of people all over the world that have been affected by colonialism and industry. So it's fun to have to explain to people that initially think, oh, Lancashire dialect, it speaks for all of us, but it needs to speak for you in the way that you understand it. You need to hear it as opposed to put your view on it. You need to listen to what it's saying to you, because it could be saying stuff that you kind of don't agree with.
Do you feel like you use archive as a form of resistance in that sense then, by sort of educating people and telling them, hey, this isn't exactly what you think it is?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, a lot of people think that ballads were written for the working classes, by the working classes, but ballads a lot of the time were written by the middle classes. Ballads are an industry, yeah? Ballads are made to make money. The oral tradition is the beautiful song tradition where there's 17 versions of many different songs, all in different accents. It doesn't need to be written down, because we have an oral culture and a singing culture like that helps you memorize things. You know, singing is a human right, up until the X-factorization of music and the music hall and ballads. Then your culture is being sold back to you by people that are trying to get your money, because you're living in slums, you're fantasizing about the village that you came from, and this happens the world over. So you're thinking loads about Rochdale and how much you miss the rolling hills of Rochdale, but you live in Ancoats in a slum. So why would you not buy poetry or songs that are singing about the countryside? Same with, like, there's loads of fake Irish ballads, like, that just kind of the bonny banks of the Shamrock Shore, you know, that'll always sell in Angel Meadow, because there's loads of like a big Irish diaspora. So you need to understand what cultural weight they have, and also the meaninglessness of them. But because people, there's like, you're always at the mercy of collectors, right? So there's a huge Orangeman archive in Oldham, but you know, I would never touch that. But some kids who aren't aware of like the Irish struggles or Orangeman, they might find some ballads in that collection that don't necessarily mention anything specifically, but they might be like, oh, I found this really cool song, and it talks about, you know, like sticking up for what you believe in, and, you know, just kind of stuff that's rhetoric that could be kind of sung wrong. And it is very much that you've got to kind of dial it back and go, right, why don't you read around the ballad? Why don't you see what accent it's in, see what was going on in that time, what collection is it from, who collected it, who wrote it? Like, once you've started asking questions around it, you'll get more of an understanding of what it's actually trying to say and who it's for.
Yeah, I agree. It's so important to ask questions and to never be satisfied with anything you receive you know, at face value. You have to keep digging deeper, because whatever you're encountering is not the full picture, and it's so nuanced and really, really incomplete. It's one facet. It's only one side of the story, and I think the role, you know, our role that we've assumed is trying to find all the different players in the story and bringing them to the fore, because sadly with history it's always about, you know, who speaks the loudest, or who had the, you know, the platform to store or relay the information, but most times it's incomplete or wrong. It's not even what happened. It's one person's perspective, and most times it's been sculpted to suit their advantage. So yeah, I totally agree. It's really important to just keep digging and investigating to ensure that the story, you know, is complete. Yeah.
And humans are flawed, you know. People will project onto stuff when they're collecting. People will project onto stuff when they found it in the archive. Don't give me that. It's catalogued. Shut up. Shut up. You didn't find it, bro. But you know, it can be loads of different things that you bring with, like, the noise in your head that you bring to this piece of literature that you then need to keep dialing back from, and then meet it where it's at, which, you know, might be 10 versions of yourself backwards. So it's and then yeah, I'm just going to start echoing exactly what you said. Go chamber, yeah. Great.
It's funny. I read an article that was written ages ago, like in maybe 1880s, by an anthropologist, and he recounted a story or an account, like his dealings with local chiefs, and they talked about, you know, this woman who was sat in a canoe, and, you know, spoke about her and how she was there to protect children and everything else, and they didn't go into detail. They edited the information, and I remember reading and thinking, they're describing Mami Wata, you know, but they didn't tell him that. I think because they didn't want him to think, oh, you know, they don't believe in Jesus and they still are holding on to their ways. But by reading this, I was like, whoa, they withheld information from this chap. So he wrote about this phantom lady, but I was like, that's Mami Wata that these guys were describing. So because I know the culture, I was able to see past that and just go, so there was this double game where they were showing what they wanted him to see or believe, but also discovering how, I don't know how true it is, but I feel as if when I look at the culture, especially coastal, you know, Ijaw culture, they preserve the names of their deities and kind of fed them into Christian religion, and just finding out, you know, from these records, like, oh, God in this language was actually like a Earth Mother, or God in this dialect was, you know, like the mother who was in charge of the rivers. But it's interesting when you see how, I would say, like, human rights commissions and things, and they're like, oh, you know, we're here to give human rights to, you know, like these African women, etc. But it's like we had rights. We were worshipped, we were revered, we were fine, you know, till they came along.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very funny to, as you said, you know, you have what you have, and then later on it's being sold back to you. But all that is it's quite humorous but annoying at the same time.
It's all like all the language around Africa is like Africa isn't like Africa doesn't lack anything. Like Africa is so rich and amazing, and all the language has ever done is like developing nation, third world country. It's like, what are these terms? Like, even that last into like government now. It's like, are you crazy? Like, this is like a beautiful, wonderful place with so a myriad cultures. You only see it for its resources, of which you want to steal, and then, like, you know, you just dumb down everything else. It's literally criminal. Like, it's crazy. I mean, they do it obviously like in the north. No way would I be equating the North to Africa now. Do not get that twisted. But I mean, they love talking down on anything that isn't kind of deemed to be well, you know, it's just kind of like how they talk down to anything that's beautiful and wonderful, because they just can't, they don't want anyone to see the good in something that they're about to ruin or destroy. Like, they don't want anyone to have any connection to it. The colonizer wants to remove any personalization or attachment to the thing they're about to destroy. It's embarrassing.
I agree. The research I'm working on right now, I discovered, I hate that word, discovered, but much to my surprise, there were centuries of trade between like southern Nigeria and Portugal, Britain, Holland, but there was so much trade that happened that most people do not know about, but they never let the Europeans in. They always met them at the coasts on the water, traded, and they parted ways. But later on, like they went through and found, like where the River Niger, they understood the lay of the land, and it began to come in, and that's how colonization happened. But for 500 years, there was trading, and it was done, it's like equals, but there was always the intention to occupy.
And what is that? That is withholding knowledge to protect people. That is the power of like knowledge sharing, and we can use that in archives to like help develop people's understanding of things, or we can use it to like protect ourselves.
So it's still trying to understand and build a picture and understand why things happened and what they meant at that time, and just trying to fill in the gaps. Where is this information held? Who knows anything about it? What is the relevance? What is this for? What does it mean? What did it mean then? And what does it mean now? And what are the implications of this information for the future? How can we use these things to help us understand even ourselves better, and to understand, our decisions or actions, and how to go forward, in a better way. So, and this is not just for us, it's also for the planet. Things like conservation, the roles that women had historically, they really, so much of it was about being in tune with the earth. Like, there is no more fishing, from this period, because the rivers and the seas need to regenerate. So fishing season is over. And if you're caught fishing, like, you'd get into trouble with the community. You take you to the judge or the head priestess, and she's like, why were you fishing? Or, but conservation, there's a time for everything. Really respecting nature, respecting the seasons, respecting our bodies and how we interact with nature. I remember my dad also telling me about they had the law of the forests, where you can go and forage for certain things, honey, etc. But you can't really, if you're hungry and you're passing through, you can harvest, fruit produce, but you need to keep the seeds or the peel at the base of the tree or the plant that you got it from. So you're not collecting, so it tempers the idea of greed. So they allowed the forest to just regenerate. The seeds stay there, they grow. But if everyone just goes in and you're taking, you deplete resources. So this understanding of harmony, synergy, but sharing, like, this is a resource for everyone. It doesn't belong to only you, and you need to take care of it as well. So that balance I've always found really poetic and very beautiful. The idea of understanding the rhythms and just being a part of it as well. I think it's something to learn from.
Is that there's a Nigerian proverb as well that I learned recently that's like, water has no enemy. And that's been a really cool one for me recently. Yo, eat the fruit but leave the seeds. That's cool. December just looked different. That's cool, thank you.
Yeah, we have a lot of proverbs and idioms. They're special because
Yeah.
encounter, it's not as prevalent in today's way of speaking, but older generation, you could have a heated conversation, but it would be so elegant.
Yes.
Idiom to idiom, proverbs, and basically each person just dropping mic, and very, very beautiful. And I've always loved Nigerian poetry and literature, and the way that words are sculpted and used, even though I remember in secondary school we had like English literature, but also literature in English, like it was separated prose, poetry, but reading the poems,
Yeah.
oh gosh, like Gabriel Okara, and there were just so many. And you hear like there was a poem, An African Thunderstorm, but also another one by Bernard Dadzier. I had to recite that when I was in primary 2. And it was like, I give you thanks, my God, for creating me Black. And he goes into detail. I didn't understand what else. I read it recently, and he was just weaving. It was about like this Pan-African movement of unity, but also reclaiming who you are after colonialism, taking pride in who you are, the things that have been stripped away from you, but just going back to yourself and knowing this is me. I love my hair. I love my nose. I love my color, but just taking pride in yourself, and that there's nothing wrong with you, and understanding that you are who you are meant to be, and you just need to accept yourself and be yourself and take up your space in the world. So I think these things matter for every culture and every person in their community. And I think it's a universal lesson. It doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. That idea of really knowing yourself and loving yourself is important, and being comfortable with yourself, and not necessarily having to put anyone down to feel good, but just knowing that, we can all exist together and learn from each other and grow together, I think is vital.
So I would really love to know what book that is and have a read for myself as well.
Yeah, I'll look up the link and share it with you.
Yeah. Going back to language, actually, I think language is really important, and it plays such an important role in how people perceive and engage with the culture. This question is actually for Amie. How do you make sure that the indigenous cultures are described in both accurate and sensitive? Is both described accurate and sensitive whilst also holding Western institution accountable? So in terms of like museums and how the language they use in describing things, sometimes when it relates to indigenous culture, can be quite almost dismissive.
Yeah.
And so as an editor, how do you sort of like challenge that?
So for me, it's very much working with the authors quite closely. Like, even though we only ever really have like a conversation in the notes section, like the comments bar or whatever, like I'm always making sure that the words that they want to use, because a lot of authors that we have write from like their own communities and their own perspective, making sure that that's honored and legitimized as much as any sort of like academic concept or whatever. And then on the flip of that, I think challenging language, like if there's an author that's using something that wouldn't really be used anymore, or there's like a more preferred term for that, it would be to sort of say like, oh, have you considered using this instead? Or like, what do you mean by this? Why are you using this word? Like, just having that very open and transparent dialogue and having that sort of line of inquiry, because language is super important. It holds so much power, especially in like a publication. So I feel like making sure that the words that are written are words that accurately represent what the author wants to say, but also that it is like honoring and respecting sort of traditions, cultural like language, like super key. Sorry, I don't know if that was like super rambly.
No, that was good. Thank you.
No
I
worries.
guess in a way I can like ask everyone the same question in a more like how do you what are the challenges and merits of working with archival materials? And like do you encounter problems when you're trying to find materials, and how like do you have any advice for getting started for people or interested in archives? Would you like to go first, Jennifer?
Yeah, I just think you can approach archivists. They literally sit in those places all day. They know so much stuff. And the fact that you'll be interested is like already day made. So go in there. I know it's hard because you can't have a brew and look at rare books. Welcome to my life. But yeah, take your pencil, go in there, try and find something online, like on because their online catalog, all online catalogs are a mess. Like the Calm I said G format is just stressy. But try and find something you're a bit interested in, and then work with that person to just keep drip feeding you stuff based on what you're kind of into, and they'll love bringing you bits and bats. It's just like being a sound to humans vibe. Like just speak on what you're interested in. What is it that I know Carlisle is quite a divisive figure. He's very racist and annoying. But he said, go as far as you can see. When you get there, you'll be able to see further. And that's what I've always tried to do. Like, I'm interested in this thing. Let's go in there. You literally did a master's or PhD in this. You've trained in this. What do you know about this collection you sit on? Right, show me that, show me this. Oh my God, that's interesting. Did you know this? Did you know that? Oh, we had this person in last week. They're interested in this. Here's their email. Like it'll snowball from there. So just go in there with an interest and a pencil and you'll be right.
I think going in as well with lots of questions, being curious, but also understanding that it's an exchange. You have knowledge about certain things because all your life, or as long as you might remember, you've been interested in things, and you have your own database of ideas and concepts that are special. And the way you see the world is very different from how everyone else sees it. So you come with your own special skill set. You probably don't know it. So when you are engaging with the archives, I think it's important to not be scared, but also just remember that you're also part of the conversation, and the curator or archivist is also learning from you. There's an exchange, and this thing you're looking at is the conduit, and sometimes you're informing them about the true nature of the object that's there and how it was used and what the name is, or how maybe your grandmother used it or what she thought of it. That's completely different from what they've cataloged and how they understand it. So I think it's important to embrace the fact that you too could be shaping the archives, and take pleasure in that, just discovering and being, I think, patient, because most times, these places are also understaffed. They have very little capacity, so they might take a long time to get back to you, but just be kind and be persistent in a gentle way. But yeah, just making yourself feel at home, I think, within the archives is important, because you will spend a long time there. It's not a quick fix, and you might have to engage with the same thing many times before you actually find the answer within it. So I think being patient helps a lot. And yeah, just also recognizing your own skills, and ask questions endlessly. There's no such thing as a bad question, I think, even when it's obvious. But just be comfortable not knowing, and ask and ask and ask. And the people who work in archives, I think they take great pleasure in knowing that people are interested and people want to know, and it keeps the archives alive. I think there's nothing worse than knowing that important documents, objects, sounds, etc., are just forgotten and relegated to the dustbins of history. I think it's important that these things are continuously engaged with and added to and continued. You know, that golden thread you spoke about, Jen, like, you know, it's continuity, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, we're all part of it, and it's important to just keep it going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're literally running over,
Oh yeah, we're so,
and I'm
like
we're
20
so
minutes
over.
over. But it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
I've had a great time.
I had such a lovely time. Thank you so much for joining us in today's episode. It's been such a pleasure hearing both of you, Alafuro and Jennifer.
Thank
And
you.
it's been wonderful co-hosting alongside you, Amie.
Yeah. Love you. Love you.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank
It's been great
you.
talking to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The podcast will be available to stream on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, and Apple. And for the young communities, thank you for listening, and we hope you join us again for our next episode. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
It's fun.